esteemed by souls that striving for fame, looking for clout. Compared to our father's riches, your dollars is change. I learned who we are, never looked at the Bible the same. Frowns on their faces, I try to explain. They scratching their heads, I'm like, bear with me. Cause early on this knowledge was hard to retain. It led to blank stares, an awkward silence remains. Why the tribe's waking up after all of this time? His son's starting to shine, they getting his daughters in line. What we call ourselves Jews, they call it a crime. How can I be anti-self? They got our hands tied. What we supposed to do nothing? I should just stand by. Said we can't wake them all up, so what we can't try? He took the flag out his pocket when they got baptized. Congratulations, eternal life is your grand prize. You going to paradise. I've been in this word all day, looking for the truth, it was right in my face. There's nothing to say, but Abba have mercy, renew our strength. This truth is gonna set us free. We need mercy, there's nothing more I could say, but renew our strength. Point me to the ones that say the most prayers. Keep me far from the faith killers, the soul slayers. Chapter 3, verse.
Shalom. Your brother Azrael, back as promised with the grace and the power and the spirit of the Most High, through the spirit of the Most High. Hope everybody had a good week and endured through this captivity that we're living in, whatever situation that may put you in. Part 3. I titled this one The Feast of Dedication. We're just going to get straight into the Feast of Dedication. A little homework for y'all, read chapter 3. I'm going to go straight to chapter 4 and hit some major points, some high points. And hopefully, we can get edified by it, about the Feast of Dedication, right? And how it came about, right? First and foremost, I want to give all glory and honor to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who sent his son as an instrument of salvation for the nation of Israel, right? Shalom to the nation of Israel, the 12 tribes scattered abroad through the 4 corners of the earth, in every kingdom, every country, every land, right? Shalom to the cleavers out there, right? That know that we are the people, know that our God is the God of gods, and they accept their role, and they're getting down with the program, right? It's the Feast of Dedication. Dedication, also known to the world as Hanukkah, right? So the Feast of Dedication is where you see the menorah lit in the back. I told you I was going to get them candles. I did. Salakia. Forgive me. But, without further ado, man, let's get straight into it. I got it right here in the physical sword, but I'm also going to show on the screen as well so you guys can read along. Right? First Maccabees chapter 4 and 28. Chapter 4 is where you can find the Feast of Dedication. Chapter 3 takes over after Mattathias dies and his son Judas takes over as lead. And he is kind of like the opposite of King Solomon. King Solomon reigned over Israel, the nation, and he had peace throughout all of his years. But Judas, man, he had war throughout all of his years. So reading chapter 3 is going to read about a lot of the wars that he won, some of the battles that he struggled with and overcame, things of that nature. Going into chapter 4, right? If you want a refresher on chapters 1 and chapter 2, right? Part 1 and part 2 is out. It's available now on all platforms, streaming. I'm just playing. It's available now, man, on our channel. We did those on the Wisdom Wednesday and Think About It Thursday. So I want to start at verse 28. As you can see, it's pulled up, right? So like, yeah. All right. So now that we got it, First Maccabees 4:28. The next year, therefore, following Lysias, gathered together 70,000. Hold up, let me start back at verse 26. Now all the strangers that had escaped came and told Lysias. Hold up, let's try 25. All right. So remember what I said, chapter 3 going into chapter 4, right? Went into Judas Maccabeus and all of his different wars that he was in. This last war ended, that they described was in chapter 4 going into the Feast of Dedication, and they had deliverance from that war, right? So, he was on a little streak, right? One would say he was operating in that spirit of David, one of our great leaders and forefathers, Judas Maccabeus. It says, thus Israel had a great deliverance that day. Now all the strangers that had escaped came and told Lysias what happened. Let me see if I can just go to the full chapter. All right. Right. 27. Who, when he heard thereof, was confounded and discouraged, because neither such thing as he would were done unto Israel, nor such thing as the king commanded him were to come to pass. The next year, therefore, there following, Lysias gathered together 70,000 choice men of foot and 5,000 horsemen, that he might subdue them. Right. So our fame had got so big from winning these wars, everybody's starting to pay attention to little old Israel. Right. So they came into Idumea and pitched their tents in Bethsura, and Judas met them with 10,000 men. Salakia parts. Verse 30, it says, and when he saw that mighty army, he prayed and said, blessed art thou, O Savior of Israel. Right? Keep in mind, there are mightier armies than Israel. There are mightier nations than Israel. Right? The Most High God speaks of these things and said we would face them and come against them. But he said that he would pretty much defeat all of them, because we're not strength in numbers. We're not strength in how mighty we are. Right? He chose us actually because we're the opposite. And so him being on our side makes us great. Right? And through our lives, we got to understand, when we dedicate, thinking about dedication, when we dedicate our lives to the Most High, right? We're saying, hey, it's not me, but you. Right? So what is he doing here before they go to war? Exactly what King David did. He's praying, right? It says, and when he saw the mighty army, he prayed and said, blessed art thou, O Savior of Israel, who didst quell the violence of the mighty man by the hand of Salakia, of the servant David, and gave us the host of strangers into the hands of Jonathan, the son of Saul, and his arm bearer. So he's bringing to remembrance to the Most High God how he operated through David. He wants to operate in that same spirit, right? Always pray the mercies of David over your life. As they say, the sure mercies of David. Also, the spirit of excellence that Daniel had, you could pray that over your life, right? It was another one I like to pray over my life. Spirit of excellence, and then favor, like Joseph had, right? Sometimes you need to pray that spirit of favor over you when you come to different situations, and put God in remembrance of our forefathers that he acted in their lives, right? And you'll be surprised how he shows up in your situation, right? Verse 31, shut up this army in the hand of thy people Israel, and let them be confounded in their power and horsemen, right? Even though they got all these soldiers and horses and things like that. Let them be confounded in their own strength, right? A lot of times, man, when we go through life, especially coming into the truth, our enemies and our oppressors come up against us, and they might have the degrees, they might have the money, they might have the power and management, but let them be confounded and let them not have any rest. There's no rest for the wicked, right? They'll be tossing over in the beds. They can't get you out of their head. They don't know why, but that's because you have a prayer life, right? Verse 32, make them to be of no courage and cause the boldness of their strength to fall away and let them quake at their destruction. Man, anything's possible, right? Um, it only takes one bad lump to spread fear to the masses, right? Fear is contagious. And that's what he's praying, that they somehow, as mighty of an army they are, have a disease of fear come among them. It says, cast them down with the sword of them that love thee, and tell and let all those that know thy praise be with thanksgiving. So they, right? So that was a mighty prayer, right? Verse 34. So they joined battle, and there were slain of the host of Lycius about 5,000 men. Even before them were they slain. 5,000, right? Now, I love this verse. Verse 35 says, not the whole entire verse, but you'll see the very first beginning of this verse, comes to mind a lot. It says, now when Lysias saw his army put to flight, and the manliness of Judas's soldiers, our nation was manly, right? He saw that we were manly and how they were ready to either live or die valiantly, right? So, people really only fear you if you're willing to die for something, right? That's why people fear uh, the Taliban and ISIS and things. When you know somebody's willing to die, that's why people fear um, um, a school shooter or a mass shooter. That's why people fear people that don't care about their lives because they have some type of mission they have to complete, and they'd rather complete that mission and die for it. Those people are scary, right? So at one point in time, we were ready to live or die for this truth, live or die for the word. And that's why all these nations feared us, because they knew when we got on that battlefield, it was no turning back. Either we were going to die or we were going to prevail. But either way, the Most High was going to see us through, right? And how they were ready to either live or die valiantly, he went into Antiochia and gathered together a company of strangers. And having made his army greater than it was, he purposed to come again to Judea. So he wanted to try again, right? Salakia. Then said Judas and his brethren, behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate this sanctuary, right? So while Judas had peeped that Lysias and them were scary, right? And they were going to regroup, they said, hey, let us cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. For a lot of you that are celebrating dedication for the first time, or either you that have been dedicating, the whole holy day or feast day is predicated on dedicating the sanctuary. Now, if you go through the Old Testament, through the law, I think in Kings and Chronicles too, we've dedicated the temple multiple times. I think in some of the prophets as well, we've dedicated the temple, right, the same way. There was laws to consecrate and to dedicate things to the Most High, right? And it usually took 7 to 8 days, right? And they have a whole we had a Salakia, we, not they, we had a whole process according to the law on how to dedicate or hallow something, right? So when you read these things in this chapter, know that it wasn't just a one-time thing, right? When we get a temple back in the kingdom, it'll be dedicated as well, right? So it says, upon Salakia, then said Judas and his brethren, behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up and cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. Upon this, all the host assembled themselves together and went up into Mount Zion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate and the altar profane and the gates burned up and shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest or in one of the mountains, yea, and the priest's chambers pulled down, this lets you know that our nation, had OCD. We paid attention to detail. We were militant. We didn't let our shrubs grow out of whack. So you brothers that have yards and you're supposed to be cutting your grass and it looks crazy, right? We weren't those type of people. We kept our stuff clean, right? It didn't look like a forest when you came to see us. It looked beautiful. And that's why people envied us and that's why people loved us. That's why people hate us, right? Because of the nation that we are and how we carry ourselves. We were a clean people. Our temple was clean. It said they burned up our gates, right? The Idumeans are always burning up our stuff, man. They think when they can burn it, right? We just give up, just like Black Wall Street, right? And we haven't seen another Black Wall Street since, right? It says, or in the mountains, yea, and the priest chambers pulled down. And then they pulled down our priest chambers, or where our priests used to stay, because they had a diligent job that they had to do, right? They probably was doing God knows what in those priest chambers while they were in our temple, right? Probably changed them priest chambers to the complete opposite, if you know what I mean. Right? Verse 39 says, they rent their clothes and made great lamentation and cast ashes upon their head. They were in a state of mourning and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces and blew an alarm with the trumpet and cried towards heaven. Right? Because our people nowadays, man, we think God's our homie and he's my best friend and that's my boy. But our people was afraid of God, especially when something like this happened, because they've seen what's happened in the past when God was angry, right? They didn't call him a great and terrible God for no reason. So of course they're gonna sound the alarm to let God know how sorrowful they were, right? Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he had cleansed the sanctuary, right? So they were fighting while they were cleansing the sanctuary at the same time. This is something out of a movie, man, right? Matter of fact, they get all these movies that you see on Netflix and stuff with wars and stuff like that. They get it out the Bible, right? Uh, verse 42. So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, right? He picked the most blameless, good reputation priests to be the priests in the temple, right? He handpicked them, right? Verse 43, who cleansed the sanctuary and bear out the defiled stones into an unclean place, right? They took all the unclean stones out of the temple, the sanctuary, and they cast it away. So part of cleansing is you got to get everything that's unclean out. Job 14:4 says, hey, who can make an unclean thing clean? No, not one, right? So if you have an unclean temple, you can't make it clean unless you get rid of all the unclean, right? And that's like our bodies too. When we dedicate our bodies to the Most High God, right? You can't pray over an abomination. You can't live an abominable lifestyle and just pray and it'll be clean. You have to come away. You got to do away with that old man and step into your new creation, right? We are new creatures in Christ, right? So we got to dedicate not only ourselves as a nation, but our temples personally, right? It says, who cleansed the sanctuary and uh, out, bear out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profane, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach to them because the heathen had defiled it, right? It's no point in keeping it. And that's how we treated these other nations too. If they touched it, man, we wasn't dealing with it, right? And then, a lot of times we'll see racism, and if we touch something, they'll throw it away. If we touch something, they want to act like it's unclean. That's how we act towards them, right? It says, wherefore they pulled it down and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. Right? Then they took the whole stones according to the law, because the law tells you how to make an altar, and there's supposed to be stones that are unhewn or untouched or unaltered by man, right? According to the law, and built a new altar according to the former, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple, and hallowed the courts, right? They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar. That candlestick is like what you see behind me, right? They had the menorahs and the altar of burnt offerings and of incense and the table. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple. So the only thing that was giving light in the temple that night was these menorahs. But I imagine they were way bigger than that right there, right? So like, yeah. And it didn't say they lit one every night, right? It didn't say nothing like that. That's how the Jewish man keeps it today, Hanukkah, right? Just light them all and keep them for the whole feast, right? We're finna pull up, or we're finna come up right now into that feast. Furthermore, they set loaves upon the table and spread out the veils and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 25th day, the 25th of the ninth month, which is called the month Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning, right? So that's why we have it around this time, right? Kind of early December, right? That early December will land us in that Hebraic ninth month, right? The suffix or the prefix for November, right, is Nov, which would be ninth, right? Um, and then you have Deci, which would be 10th. So that early-ish, right, December kind of lands us in that the 25th day of the ninth month, right? In 148th year, they rose up at times in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar. Once again, we had a certain way to dedicate temples and altars according to the law. They were just following the law of the burnt offerings which they had made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs and cisterns and harps and cymbals, right? So we played music. It was a joy to get our temple back. And also, the Most High God loves a good melody, right? Melodies from heaven, right? He loved when David danced, right? He loved these things. So, and this is another thing, there's some people that don't believe that we can play instruments, right? But we can and do. We have played instruments. David played instruments, right? So they played music after they dedicated the temple. So when we have our feast days nowadays, we can play music. You brothers and sisters that's talented, you can play music and you can sing. It says with songs, right? Get out your comfort zone. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the God of heaven who had given them good success. So when you at your events, man, you should be in a constant state of worshiping and praising God for what he did by giving us our temple back and that victory that time, because they were going through heavy persecution, right? And we should be grateful and praising and worshiping that he woke us up in the right mind to know the truth and to be celebrating it again, even in the land of our captivity after all was forgotten, right? He's woken us up and brought things back to remembrance. 56 and said, and so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days and offered burnt offerings with gladness and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. Right. So that's that burnt sacrifice, right? Salakia. Um, uh, burnt offerings were the sacrifices, but this is the candles that was lit, right? And we keep those candles lit for the whole 8 days, and that is our altar, right? Um, they decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold. So you guys go to a hobby lot, a party store, get some crowns of gold. They could be plastic, right? Or they could be little metal ones. Decorate your houses or decorate your feast day, right? Get creative. It says with shields, right? The gates and the chambers they renewed and hanged doors upon them. Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away, right? If we think about all the holy days and feast days, a lot of them, if not all of them, had to do with him putting the heathen away from us, right? Or saving us from the heathen, these other nations, right? Him rescuing us. And they're to be celebrated so that we won't forget him rescuing us, right? Moreover, Judas and his brethren, with the whole congregation of Israel, ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days. Right? I want to make um a point here. Right? Dedication is not one of the feasts of the Lord. Right? Found in Leviticus 23 or found in the law. Right? As we read here, Judas, who was the leader in Israel at the time, right? He ordained this to be a feast year by year. Now, in America or whatever you were in, whatever religion you were in, before you came into the truth or the knowledge of the truth, you celebrated holidays. And some holidays were bigger than others. Some holidays, your country gave you off, and some holidays you might have to put in PTO if you wanted to take that day off, right? It's nothing different, right? You're gonna have some holidays, holy days that weigh more, right? But that doesn't mean that you don't celebrate them, right? We've taken time to celebrate things under the sun before, right? So why not now for the most high? Why not celebrate it just because it's not in the law, right? We see our forefathers, they ordained it. So it was serious to the people of Israel, right? And the Most High God said, when you vow a vow, you must pay what you owe. You got to pay what you owe to the Most High God, right? And since we are a part of the nation of Israel, the congregation of Israel, and our forefathers made that vow, we have to stick it through, right? Just like they made that vow in the wilderness with the old covenant with Moses, right? They made that vow. We wasn't there, but we still have to keep it because they made it for us. And so we fall underneath that vow, right? So that's my 2 cents on how on keeping the feast of dedication, even though it's not in the law, right? It says that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their seasons from year to year by the space of 8 days, right? From the 5 and 20th day of the month Caslu, with mirth and gladness, right? So you should be happy. You shouldn't be irritated or stressed out or mad, or you shouldn't. If you feel those spirits coming up, you remind yourself you're supposed to keep this feast with mirth and gladness, right? Verse 60 says, at that time also they builded up the Mount Zion with high walls and strong towers round about. We're not a dumb people. We're going to build up the strong towers that all these nations were so envious about, right? We done built up all these. Why do you think as soon as they put us into captivity, they ask us to build walls and temples and all these things for them? Because they know we're good with our hands and they know that we know how to set up an empire. If only we could just do that for ourselves again, but a time is coming where they'll build up our kingdom, right? Um, Lest the Gentiles should come and tread it down as they had done before. So they just being prudent, right? After they got the temple right, they got the city right. Verse 61. And they set there a garrison to keep it and fortified Bethsura to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against who? Idumea, right? And we know Idumea is Esau, Edom, and we know that Esau, Edom, and Idumea were the Greeks, and we know that the Greeks happen to be what? The so-called white man. So, with that is the Feast of Dedication. In the book of First Maccabees, um, like I said, man, read over chapters 1 through 4. You'll find a whole bunch of stuff each time you read it. Read past it, right? And shalom to the brother Obadiah. Shalom. And shout out to the brothers new page and congregation, New Wine Congregation of Israel. Y'all check them out, man. A lot of very good, sincere brothers in there. Love doing the work with them brothers. But other than that, man, I hope you were edified. I hope this piqued your interest to go read it yourself, right? But like I said, man, the Feast of Dedication, right? Let's dedicate our temples. Let's dedicate our lives. Let's dedicate our families, right? Let's remember the dedication that our forefathers did, right? And let's keep it with mirth and gladness, praise and worship, and continue to pray for our salvation. With that, I'm Azrael. This is the Hopeful Elect. Factual Friday. It is, in fact, the Feast of Dedication, at least for over here at the Hopeful Elect. Shalom.